Hi my loves, welcome to the channel Style by C. Today's tutorial will be on how to recreate this beautiful piece. Do subscribe, share and like. Basic body, this is my chest line, my bust line, under bust and half length. Okay, this is actually a normal basic body. Now we're going to go ahead proper with the cutting of dies, the drafting of our bustier. Now I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple measurements on my under bust, on the bust line and on the half length, and this is what I have. I'll go ahead and connect these 3 points together. Okay, now on the under bust, the side, I'm going to mark 1.25 inches. I will do the same thing on the half length. Then inwards, I'm going to mark 1 inch, and this is what I have. Now I'll go ahead and connect these 2 points together. Okay, using the curved part of this row, I'm going to connect to my bust line. And this is what we have. Now we're going to go ahead to our shoulder slope, and we're going to divide what we have left, what we have on our shoulder slope, into 2. Now from here, now we're going to connect to the bust line. And this is what we have. The next thing we have to do now is, from the shoulder or the start point line, we're going to determine where we want our over bust to be. To actually get this, what you have to do is, on the norms, is to divide the difference between your under bust. That's to divide what you have between your under bust and bust line into 2, which is, we have 3 here. When we divide it, will be left with 1.5 inches. So from the chest line, you go up by 1.5 inches, right? So this is where your over bust is going to be. Okay, but because if I should do this, I'm going to be, my bustier area is going to be a little bit up. I don't want it that way. So what I have to do now is, from the shoulder line, I'm going to come down to 6.5 inches. Please note that I'm using 6.5 inches because it's my choice. But if you're working on a normal norm, use the difference between your bust line and your under bust. From your chest line, you go up by that difference. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and make a V across my over bust. Alright, now the next thing to do now is, we're going to tighten this over bust. To do this, we're going to mark 0.75 inches on both sides of this, and this is what we have. Now we'll go ahead and connect to this point, and this is it. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do now is, we're going to go ahead to insert our actual body measurements. So we'll start off with the half length. We're going to insert our waist measurements here. Then what we have here, because this piece is going off, this marked area are all going off. We have 2.25 here. We're going to be adding it back to the pattern paper. 2.25. I'm going to come to my chest line, insert my bust measurements, and what I have here, I have 0.75 inches. I'll add it back to my pattern paper, and this is what I have. Now I'm going to connect these 2 points together. Now the next thing I'm going to do now is, here at the over bust, we have 1.5 inches here. We're going to be adding it back to our pattern paper. Okay, but please, this now you're going to be doing it in a little bit of a slant, not in a straight line. If you notice, my tape is a little bit on a slant form, and this is what I have. So from here now, I'm going to be making a slant inwards, and this is what I have. Then I'll go ahead to retrace my armhole. Okay, so loves, this is what we have for our bustier. Now this area is going to be our yoke. All right, so now the next thing to do now is, you're going to go ahead and determine how deep you want your yoke to be. That is, sorry, how deep you want your neck area to be. If you want the turtleneck, you can decide to work with 3. If you want your collarbone to show, you can decide to work with 3.5 inches or 4 inches. So for this, I'm going to be working with 3.5 inches. then I'm going to curve it. And this is what we have for our bustier. Now we also draft out the back piece. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So first and first, I'm going to mark is my zipper allowance. I have 1.5 inches for my zip allowance. So this is the actual line. All these ones are just an error. Okay, so I'll insert my shoulder measurement, then mark my neck width, which is 3 inches. Now for my shoulder measurements, I'm going to come down to 1 inch for my shoulder slope. Connect these 2 points together, and this is what I have. Now from this point now, I'm going to go down to my armhole measurement, which is 7.5 inches. Then I'm going to insert my shoulder measurements on my chest line. That is where we have our armhole depth. Okay, I have 8 inches. Now the next thing I'm going ahead to do now is I'm going to divide what I have on my armhole area into 2. Get the midpoint. So from that midpoint now, I'm going to insert back my shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches. Then I'll go in by 1/2 inch. I'll connect to my shoulder slope using the curved part of this and make a curve into my chest line. And this is what we have. Now the next thing we have to do now is we have to go ahead to insert our actual body measurements. This part is not really being too tricky or something like that. So here now, which is our chest line, we insert our bust measurements. On our waist, we'll go ahead and insert our waist measurements and connect them. Please note that there is no seam allowance here. While cutting on our pattern paper, on our fabric, while transferring this on our fabric, we'll go ahead to cut out to add our seam allowances. Now for my neck depth, I'm going to be working with 1.5 inches. That is for my back piece. The front piece I use 3.5. For the front, I'm using 1.5. Then I'll connect these 2 points together, and this is what we have. Now if you notice on our dress, we have kind of the back piece still has a net area. All right, so from here now, that is from the shoulder line, I'm going to go down by 6.5 inches. That is the same depth I used for my over bust for the front. So this is my 6.5 inches. I'm going to make a row across that point. Okay, so this is for my back yoke. So this is the back yoke and this is the front yoke. Okay, and note that for your back piece, you're also going to be having a dart. All right, which is going to be 1 inch below your chest line. That is 1 inch below your chest line to what you have here. Let's say maybe half an inch on both sides. So this is for your back and this is for your front. Okay, so now if you look at this area now, you can see some adjustments. Reason because I have this adjustment is I actually used 7.5 inches for my shoulder line when I was made to use 8 inches. Okay, that is why I adjusted this. Yeah, someone will be like, okay, the shoulder slope didn't it alter it? Actually, it did not. I was lucky enough it did not alter it. But please ensure you use your actual shoulder measurements for yours. So now we'll go ahead to cut this piece out. So this is my front piece. This is for our bustier. So this is what we have for our front piece. All you have to do is to transfer this to your fabric, add your seam allowance, your seam allowance, actual seam allowance. Then on the side, on the center here of this bustier, these areas, you have to add half an inch. This is for your joining allowance. You keep this aside because of this area. So guys, this is what we have for our pieces. To place my tape at my half length, which is 16 inches, then the full length I'm working with is 47 inches, including the seam allowance. So here now, this is where I'm going to insert my waist measurements, which is 7.5 inches plus 2 inches seam allowance. Now from this up part, I'm going to go down to 9 inches, which is my hip measurement. So I will insert my hip measurements. So my hip measurements is 10 inches, 9.75 inches, sorry, plus 2 inches seam allowance. Now from this point, I'm going to connect to my waist. That is from the hip to my waistline, and this is what I have. Now from here, I'm going to be connecting to the bottom of my gown, or to the base of the gown. So guys, the next thing I wanted to do was to place my fabric on another folded fabric and cut out my back. Now, to cut out the back, we had 1.5 inches spacing before placing the front. This is for our zip allowance. Okay, you just go ahead and trace it out, then open up your zip allowance. Next thing to do is to cut out a lining piece for each of them. The next step now is to cut out our sleeve. So you're going to determine how long you want your sleeve to be. So for this, I'm going to be working with 23 to 24 inches long for my sleeve. Actually, I wanted to make use of this cutout at the bottom, but at the end of the day, I decided otherwise to fold it just like what we have in the thumbnail. Okay, so arrange your fabrics properly. Mark the full length of your sleeve. Okay, from the tip of your sleeve where you have your start points, come down to 4 inches. This is for your biceps line or cap height. So at that point now, you go ahead and insert your bust measurement plus your seam allowance. So this is my bust measurements. I'm going to go ahead and add my seam allowance. Work with either 1.5, 2 inches or 1, depending on what you want. Okay, so at this point now, you go ahead and insert your wrist measurements. Okay, I think I have about 4 inches or 4.5 plus my seam allowance. Then from here, I'm going to connect it to the tip of my, that is where I have my cap height. Please, my apologies, the chalk is very faint, it's not showing. So I would then go ahead to cut out my sleeve with the trace of the chalk I had earlier. My apologies again, it was not very clear, or it was not clear at all. It was very, very faint. So cut out your sleeve. So my loves, for the yoke area, that is the neck area from the yoke, I went ahead to cut it out, and I cut out 2 pieces for my front, same thing for my back, because I do not want to turn mine with a bias or maybe anything. I just want to turn it out with the same lace fabric. So I went ahead to cut it out. I'm also going to do the same thing for my back piece, but I did that off the camera. This is for the front piece. Okay, see you in our next tutorial for the part 2, that is the sewing part of the tutorial, the sewing part of the gown.